Welcome to Freedom Decoded. My name is Demir Bentley. You're listening to Freedom Decoded, a podcast where Carey and I normally let our hair down and talk to you about the behind the scenes of our freedom lifestyle. Today, we're actually going to be bringing in a special guest, Jenny Gottstein, who's going to be talking to us about a really fascinating topic and something that a lot of our clients have struggled with, which is her Sparkle Zone training. But we're going to dive into all of that. I'm just going to say, Jenny, welcome.
Thanks, Demir. So great to be here.
So, little known factoid about you and I is that we grew up in the same small town.
Hmm. A town of 100 people. So
I
we
know.
we know each other pretty well.
Yeah. That's so funny. And our, as per normal, we both went our separate ways and then relinked up again in New York. And why don't you tell people a little bit about your background? And we'll get into sort of how you got to where you're at today, but give them a little bit of like, what does your path look like up to this point?
So I guess when we got reconnected in New York, I was probably just coming out of school, and my first job was in entertainment. I worked in nightlife, which is ironic because, as you know, I'm a very serious person. But I had gotten this bee in my bonnet, and I thought that fun and play was a real catalyst for change. So I wanted to understand, how do you make fun and play happen? So I dove into creating that in New York. Then I got a kind of once in a lifetime job that fell in my lap where I joined a company called the Go Game and designed interactive adventure games all around the world for about 7 years. And these games were kind of like The Amazing Race meets The Game with Michael Douglas and Sean Penn, where they're actors and secret agents. And it was great. I got to create mayhem and chaos and fun wherever I went. Um, and it was a real education in how you design for play.
Can I just pause and just say, like, what people probably don't understand about this is like you would actually like parachute into different cities and set
Yeah.
up these like super elaborate games that sometimes like hundreds of people would
Yes.
play. I mean, it really is when you say once in a lifetime job, it's one of those jobs where you're like, when we met up again, I was like, wait, that's a job? You get paid to do this? It sounds incredible.
I felt the same way. Yeah. It was great. And we created these games for different reasons, for team building, for tourism, for marketing, for entertainment. And I got to not only produce these games, and on average, about 100 a year. And these are like, in many cases, bespoke experiences. So when you say parachute, you're not kidding. I was really barreling into a place, figuring out how to make it fun really fast. But fun for a reason, right? And then I became the director of games and innovation. I ran our team globally. That was another education in what's fun in Copenhagen may not be fun in Singapore. And then after that, I got the opportunity to work at a design company called IDEO, and they have a play lab. And I joined the play lab as an experienced designer. And I did that for just about 5 years. Yeah, if I'm getting my
Again,
math
I just have
correctly.
to jump in here and say, like, people are probably listening to this and being like, "Oh my God, this this woman has gotten the most amazing jobs." I mean, that just sounds like incredible. Okay, so although I would love to, like, we could spend hours just digging into
Sure.
like that. What's really interesting, the topic of today's conversation is a little bit going to be what happened inside of that job and as you evolved and what's happened with you personally around your mission and what you want to do with your life and what it is. And I want to set this up a little bit. In the life hack method, we talk a lot about creating people's life map. And a life map is a model of your life and success. Right. And so it's a mission, a vision, and what we call a leverage ladder. If you're listening to this and you're not part of Lifehack Method and you've never done this, don't worry. All that you really need to understand is it's simply like a priority list. It's a document that's your dotted line to the buried treasure of your life, right? It's just like, this is where I'm going, these are the steps I have to take, and this is the payoff once I get there. And the part of the life map that flummoxes people the most, that sometimes gives them heart palpitations, if not full blown breakdowns, is like the mission. Like, what am I supposed to be doing in my life? And often I'll get people, Jenny, in their 40s, 50s, even 60s saying, what do I want to be when I grow up? And they're like, oh, eek, I'm grown up. Like, how can I still be asking myself this question of what do I want to be when I grow up when I'm pretty much grown up, right? And it really gives us all the scaries. all the palpitations, right? And so you experienced a form of this yourself, didn't you?
Yes. So I remember the moment that you asked me my mission statement, I had quit my job because for a pandemic, I was feeling pretty burned out. I had spent so much time teaching other people how to make fun and make play. I totally lost sight on how to do that for myself. And so I decided to take a break, take a breather, and reset and reconnect with myself. Got an opportunity to spend time together, and you asked me point blank, okay, so what's your mission? And I had all of those feels that you just expressed. And I really resisted. I don't know if you remember this, but I kind of bristled. Maybe it was in front of you, maybe it was just later, but I remember tossing and turning thinking, you can't I contain multitudes. Like, you can't put baby in a corner. Like, what are you talking about one mission? I'm so many things. I do this, I make zombie apocalypse disaster preparedness games. I create textile recycling festivals. Like, no, like a mission will not contain me. But I kept thinking about it, I kept thinking about it, and finally it emerged after a couple days of agony. And it wasn't until the mission statement revealed itself that the sparkle zone process, which we're going to talk about, really started to work and work like whoa. And so I realized that this process that I'd been working on for myself to tap into the sparkliest version of myself didn't really the rubber didn't really meet the road until it was integrated into the life hack method. And I have you to thank for that. Thank you for pushing me to think about my mission, because everything else is kind of fallen into place and taken me in wild directions that I could have never anticipated. So here we
I
are.
love it. So let's talk about this sparkle zone concept that you developed for yourself. And what I love about it is, like, we're gonna start double clicking. So let's start at the highest, most generic level. As I understand it, and please correct me where I'm wrong. Like,
Yeah.
at the highest level, if I was Chat GPT and I was trying to define what is sparkle zone, it would really be a process for helping you understand what makes you feel sparkly, right?
Mhm.
What gets you lit up every day? And even on the days when you're not lit up, what keeps you moving through the doldrums because you're so inspired by where you're going? So maybe let's double click one level down and maybe help us understand, like, at a high level, how would you define it?
Sure. So the sparkle zone is the term that I lovingly use to describe the overlap of four buckets in my life. And that is my purpose, where I feel called to serve, my prowess, what I'm really, really good at, my personal growth, where I want to be better, and my play, what brings me a lot of joy. And when those four things overlap in the same focus, the same project, the same effort, that's when I feel sparkly AF. And so sparkle zoning, this process, is what I developed as a methodology to figure out how to spend the majority of my waking hours in that space. Um, and by the way, I call it the sparkle zone. It has been called many things since the beginning of time: dharma, ikigai, divine calling. Like, this is not a new concept, but what has been really exciting and rewarding is applying my game design skills and the human-centered design skills that I picked up at IDEO to myself to figure out, how do I optimize for my sparkle zone and how do I use it to make decisions on a day-to-day basis.
Oh man, I love that. So can you give me those four again, just so that people, I'm sure people are like, whoa, 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 I need to get my pencil or pen
Sure.
ready. Okay, so what are
Yeah.
those four?
Purpose, prowess, personal growth, play. So, where you called to serve, what you're good at, where you want to grow, what you love to do.
And when we were having our conversations, you were I want to be clear, like, it wasn't like, oh, I did this once and then it all revealed itself
No.
in this perfect unraveling. And I think this is often what we get so much with mission, is that all of us A-type people, when given an assignment, what do we want to do? We want to finish the assignment as soon as possible. We want to get an A plus with a little star on it, and we want to put it in a drawer and move on to the rest of the things in our life. But unfortunately, this process can be very long. It can
Mhm.
be agonizing. It can really force you to ask questions that you'd rather not have to ask. And it can also be an invitation, or at least a requirement, to step into experimentation prototyping around what you
Mhm.
want. So this was not like an overnight experience for
Absolutely
you,
not.
right?
Yeah, no, it took a long time to arrive at even the process, which is still evolving. And much like the winning the week method, it doesn't actually work until it becomes a practice, right? It doesn't actually work until you're going to the gym consistently. So that's also why the integration of the sparkle zoning process with LHT was the unlock, because I realized, like, this needs to be a weekly ritual where I'm reflecting on this and redirecting myself accordingly. So,
Yeah, so what you've been doing, as I understand it, is, and I love this analogy of the gym. It's like we could create the best diet plan and best exercise plan, and that's all fine. That's actually important work to be doing. But where the progress really happens, where it really meets the road, is in our making the right meals and eating the right meals every day
yeah.
and hitting the gym. And that's the part that like a lot of us would rather not do. It's like, can I just do a lot of work once and then set
Mhm.
it and forget it? And this is a process, and I just want to emphasize this for people who are out there struggling with finding their mission, finding their sparkle zone, right? Getting in that place that they really want to be in their life. I think probably the best expectation setting up front is just when you set your expectation that's going to happen in like a day, a week, or a month, you are setting yourself up for misery, because it's not going to happen that fast. It almost never happens that fast. You have to sort of say, does it matter if it takes 3 years if I ultimately get to a place where I am very deeply aligned in all of those 4 Ps? And the answer is like, no, it doesn't matter if it takes that long, because it's worth it. But I
Totally.
think we have to take that school brain of ours where it's like, I'm going to cram for the test and I'm going to take the test, then the test will be over. We have to take that and put it aside and recognize this is more of a practice than it is just like a homework assignment, right?
Absolutely. And it gets more and more exciting the more you zoom out. So, where this really clicked for me was when my partner and I were doing the reflection end of year exercise that you and Carrie recommend, where you sit down and you write down all of your wins, all of your losses, and your personal and your professional. And I took it another step further and I asked myself, which of these things were in my sparkle zone? And you can get really crispy on that, like, did my purpose show up in this? Did my play show up in this? And so I have this like 4-star system now where I'm rating these wins and seeing like how sparkly are they. And it wasn't until I did that where I was like, oh my God, look what has happened. Look what life I'm living now. This was a year after you'd first asked me that mission question, and I started tying these methodologies together to support myself. Because you're right, at day to day, it can be pretty excruciating. But when you zoom out and you look back over a longer chunk of time, you can see the progress and you can see yourself living the life that you actually want to be living. So I highly recommend the reflection piece as well.
I love that you touched on that. So I don't know how down this rabbit hole we want to go, but I think this idea of what I've seen a lot when I've walked people through finding their mission is often when people are completely lost. They're like, I have no idea what I should be doing. I'll say, let's find the mission that you've already been serving, meaning what has the totality of what you've already been doing in your life. If you put that into a sentence, if you put that into a mission, what would it have been? There's a guy named David. I don't want to out him by saying his last name, but there's a guy named Dave who was one of my clients, and he was like, "Oh, I'm a foot doctor. You know what? I'm just a boring old foot doctor. All I do is I'm a foot doctor. I spend 80 hours a week being a foot doctor. I don't know what I'm supposed to do." I'm like, okay, well, let's look at what you've already been doing. Meaning, and this is a little bit morbid, but try not to take it too much in the morbid respect. Like, if you got hit by a bus tomorrow, what would the impact that you've already had have been? Right. And so, he came up with one that was really, I don't know, I fix people's feet. And it's funny that he said this to me because I have had excruciating foot pain previously in my life. I had a whole year where I could barely walk for longer than a half an hour continuously on my right foot. And so I think my higher power had literally put me in that moment with him because I was like slapped him across the face a couple times. I was like, you do not understand. Like, yes, people walk around every day on both feet, and the people who don't have foot pain are probably like, They don't even think about their feet. But when you have excruciating foot pain and it takes you out of the things that you enjoy doing and you can't go to sleep at night because your foot is hurting so bad, like you wouldn't believe how badly that impacts your quality of life. I mean, it's just horrible. And so we actually wrote a mission for him about like helping. What we did in his mission is we contained the totality of like, hey, there's so many people out there right now playing tennis, playing golf, playing with their kids, right? And they don't even know the pain that they could be in because so they don't know the counterfactual. They don't know what their life could have been and how much pain they'd be in, how much they would have had to give up if you hadn't fixed their foot. And so I can't remember and don't want to venture to guess like what the sentence was, but we put together a sentence for his mission that talked about helping people navigate the world pain-free so that they could really live their best life without having to be distracted by pain and really being able to go out and do the things they wanted. And when he read that mission, he fell in love with what he did all over again. And he
Oh.
realized it was almost like he came back to himself. He was like, this is actually why I got into this. There was tears. It was like, oh my God, it was almost like falling in love with your spouse or your partner again, like and seeing them in the way that you saw them originally. I'm getting emotional about this, but like,
Mhm.
you know, and I think the first thing I try to do with people is help them understand what they've already been doing. And I think that's such a great place to start with mission because even if Dave wanted to like quit, he'd been a foot doctor for like 20, 25 years. It's okay to say like, I'm done with that. I've already done that. I've done something great, but still, even if you walk away from something, you want to understand what's the good that I've already done, right? And what's the impact that I've already had? And I think that's such an important way to start this process is by acknowledging
Absolutely.
what you've already been up to, what you've already done. And I think people are so dismissive about themselves, about their jobs, and about, oh, I'm just doing that. Oh, I'm just this, or I'm just that. And it's like, no, like really get into the most charitable place. And like
Totally.
imagine like, what have I already been doing? So I'm sorry I'm blathering. Let me toss that to you. How does that land with you when I say that?
No, 100%. And it's about starting with reflection and celebrating yourself for what you are doing already. And then I think there's an opportunity to dial up the sparkle so that you feel this divine sense of joy and lightness and purpose. And it becomes the most amazing decision-making tool. It's like a hot knife through butter, where all of a sudden, if you know what your mission is, you know what to say no to. And I've had this experience of well, saying yes to the things that historically I would say yes to because I know I'm good at it. I know someone wants me to do it. All of the should. And I referred back to my mission. I was like, you know what? This does not further my mission. And in fact, this is distracting from my champagne moment, my sparkly champagne moment that I spent a lot of time crafting for myself. And so I can't stress how important having a clear, sparkly mission statement is in making decisions that frees up your time so you can do what you're here to do.
I love that you said that. People say, "Oh, mission," because the problem with when we say a mission statement, the corporate world has really stretched that term out to the point
Yeah.
where it almost is like meaningless. Like, and you read corporate mission statements, it's like, "We're here to provide excellent customer service and the highest level of integrity," and you're like, blah blah blah. Like they're using all of this fancy corporate speak that means nothing and that pulls all of the soul out of it. But I think a great mission statement is a very sharp tool in your tool belt. And what it does is it helps you understand like what wave you should be surfing, right?
Mhm.
Meaning like in a world where there's wave after wave after wave coming at you, right? And things again, things you might get paid for handsomely, but don't serve other criteria in your life. I mean, there's just so many great opportunities and things that we could do in our life. We tend to have this paradox of choice where it's like, but what should I, in this world of everything that I could do? And I know I have so much possibility. What should I do? And I think a great mission statement tells you exactly like, do this, don't do that. Do this,
Mhm.
don't do that. Do this, don't do that. And despite how tempting this thing looks, don't do it. You should do this other thing that feels a lot harder because that's the wave that you should be surfing.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. You know, the other thing that I love about a mission statement is that it helps you bet on yourself. A dear friend of mine, we talk about this we were pep talking each other as we were diverging from this conventional path into this unconventional, more sparkly path that we were trying to design for ourselves. And one day she said, "Yeah, Jenny," because I was at a crossroads. I said, "Do I do this thing that I know how to do that, tried and true, or do I take this big leap?" And she goes, "Jenny, bet the whole house." And so that was her invitation to me to bet on myself, to trust that I could take this gigantic leap of faith and stick the landing. And not only did I do that, but I've done that multiple times since, and it has dramatically changed the course of my life. So I'll give you an example of how, life hack method, how combining that with the sparkle zone has changed everything that I've done in the course of, I mean, 2 years, but really a year, right? So prior to this, I was working in consulting and I knew how to do that. I knew how to help clients figure out what they needed to do to use play design to get a bigger impact in their work. And so when I left my job, I thought, well, I guess I'll just be a consultant, which, I have no problem being a consultant. But at the time, that was not an expression of my sparkle zone. That was me copping out, right?
It's what felt
Um,
possible. It's
it's
like,
what
well,
felt
that just feels
possible.
easy. Yeah.
Exactly. And meanwhile, I started cultivating a Sparkle Zone project. You know about it because I asked you to help me play test it, a climate action game show. This was an idea that I'd had many years ago. I thought, what if you could make climate action, talking about climate solutions, fun, or at very least not depressing? Like, is that even possible? And I was curious about it, and it gave me a little like bloop in my chest, which was is always a good sign. And so I started experimenting with it, and it started to snowball, and it started to snowball, and it ended up we brought it to a festival, we brought it to different clients, it took on a life of its own, and at the end of last year, there was another crossroads of, do we my partner and I, do we continue to cultivate this thing, which is a vast unknown? I've never done anything like this, launching an experience to the world. I just tell other people how to do it, or I make it for clients, or do we do the tried, tested, true path? And I remembered the no, bet the whole house. And I also remembered my mission. And I asked myself, what is more in service of my mission? And the answer was the game show. And with that leap of faith, I reached out and pitched my old company that I used to work with on an idea. And they were like, we're game. And now we are launching the game show to the world April 1st, and that would not have been possible had we not had this conversation about this mission and
Yeah.
had this practice of circling back to it and using it as this decision-making tool. So I'm
Yeah.
so grateful to you and to Carey for creating this process and for creating a space where people can practice it. I've so enjoyed being a part of Tribe. So, yeah, I can't sing this from the treetops enough. This really works, or it has worked for me.
Well, it's interesting because I almost think about, those water diviners where it's like you're trying to find like, okay, in a dry space, like where's the water? Where should we dig
Right.
for the water? And I think often when I ask people what's sparkly for you or what's your mission, I think the problem is that modern life can be such a bummer and be filled with so many responsibilities that sometimes that part of our brain that can even think and tune into what we want for ourselves or what's sparkly can actually sort of atrophy. I don't want to say die because that's not true, but it can very much atrophy to the point where sometimes when you've been in corporate doing what other people want and have a family and just doing things what your husband or your kids need or your family
Mhm.
needs, you can get to a point where when somebody asks you what do you want, it's like, oh my God, it's like that nothing comes up.
Yeah.
And what I love about your Sparkle Zone process is that it very much gives you a methodology where in a seemingly dry landscape, you can start thinking about where to dig for water. Right?
Yes, you're retraining your brain to listen to yourself, but it is very step by step. So I don't know if you want me to get into that or if we save that for.
Well, I'll leave it to you. If you want to touch on some things, we can. But I do. This is a good time to say, gang, if you are in Lifehack Tribe, Jenny is going to be revealing and stepping through the entire Sparkle Zone process in our upcoming monthly training. That training is going to be, I pulled it up here, is going to be Wednesday, April the 5th at 12 noon Eastern time. I'll say that again, Wednesday, April the 5th at 12 noon Eastern time. And you can go to the live call schedule in our Lifehack Tribe page. So you can sign up and register for that, because I know there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be like, oh my God, this is what I've been really wanting and really needing. So with that, I'll say that, Jenny, you can touch on anything you want from the process, but you don't have to go into the whole thing, because
Right.
people will know that they can
Yeah.
jump in.
You know what? I'm gonna save that fun stuff for later. I'm gonna share where the Sparkle Zone process came from, and maybe that'll shed a little bit of light on what it is that we're gonna be doing. So rewind the tape to summer of 2020. There's a lot happening in the world. I don't know if you remember. And a colleague of mine reached out because I was doing a lot of organizing at work. That was something I was passionate about. I really wanted to gather my peers to create new things that we were proud of. And a colleague reached out and said, "Hey, I really appreciate how you bring your values to work. Can you give me some pointers?" And I was like, "Oof, no, I don't know what I'm doing." I don't know what I'm doing. But I would really appreciate a thought partner in exploring and testing out ideas together. Would you be that person? And she said yes. So we started meeting once every couple of weeks and just reflecting on things that we were doing and what was working and what wasn't working, and just trying to find patterns. One thing that I realized pretty early in those discussions was that when I had 2 out of the 4 buckets, this is before the sparkle zone was even a glimmer in my eye, but I was starting to see that, well, obviously purpose is important to me, play is important to me. I've built an entire career believing in it. And, I'd like to think I've acquired some skills along the way, but I still have many more too. So those kind of categories were starting to emerge, but what I realized was that when I had over-indexed in 1 or 2 of those things without counterbalancing with the other things, I would start to spin out. So, for example, if I was over-indexing in purpose, I'd feel this really strong drive. The world needs what I'm trying to do. I'm here to support, I'm here to serve. And maybe I might couple that with prowess, with something that I'm really good at. And that might have felt good for a while, but then I would burn out because there was not enough
Mhm.
joy, there was not enough curiosity, there's not enough, like, stretching, and then I would feel a whole layer of guilt, like, "Oh my god, Jenny, like, how are you stopping now? The world needs this, you're letting everybody
Yes.
down," and I would go into, a nosedive. On the other side of things, I might find something that I love to do, it brings me tons of joy, I might be really good at it, and it would feel so good for a while, and then I would kind of bottom out. It's kind of like eating a week's worth of meals of bubble gum where it's like, "This tastes great," and by the end, you're like, I hate it all." Because there would be this little voice in my head like, "Well, are you doing this to distract yourself from what the world really needs?" And that balance wasn't there. So from those conversations, I realized, oh, I need all of these things to be present in the same effort. It doesn't work if you have a little joy over here, a little purpose over here. I mean, it may sustain you for a while, but it doesn't give you that same sparkly feeling. And
Yes.
so that was the origins of the sparkle zone as a like, oh, I need these 4 categories. Then I went on a road trip with my partner through the Southwest, had all sorts of like eureka moments, as you do in the Southwest. And the biggest eureka moment was, you know what? The world desperately needs us all to be in our sparkle zones. Like nothing less will do. If we're going to make transformation happen, we can't we can't, you know, limp our way there. We all have to like
Mm.
find our sparkle zone and like hold hands and Care Bear stare it. Otherwise, like we're just gonna keep, spinning out. And and I realized in that moment, wow, I'm not spending the majority of my day in my sparkle zone, and that's a problem.
Yes.
And so the process came from that of like, how do I identify, assess, and ideate what I want to do next? And how do I then integrate that into my life to create more sparkle more of the time? So that's
Yeah.
where the process came from, and that's what we're going to be diving into.
Boy, I love that. So, well, I guess we'll wrap it up here, but just some final thoughts. What I heard from that, I heard a lot of sustainability and balance, right? This
Mm,
idea that, like, yes, one of those four can feel really good, one or two, but if you don't have all four of them in some level of balance over a longer period of time, what you're going to start to realize is that you're not getting that full body sparkle that you're looking for. And I love the idea of sparkle because you can see it, can't you, Jenny, when somebody is in their sparkle zone, right? You
You
can
can
really
see behind
see.
their eyes. It's incredible.
Yeah, you can just see that somebody's like, wow, and it's not like you're the second coming of Jesus Christ. I mean,
No.
just more of like in that real way of just like, wow, this person is just loving their life and they love what they do and they could do it every day. And I generally, when I see people who've either through work or through luck have found their way to a sparkle zone, often you'll hear them say things like, man, I could do it. I could do this every day for the rest of my life. I just love what I do. Or you'll hear them say things like, I can't believe I get paid to do this. I'm so lucky. They're filled with a lot of gratitude. And so yeah, I guess maybe that's the result that we're looking for. And again, it's not an overnight thing. It's a
No.
process, sometimes a painful process. It can be 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 5 steps
Mhm.
forward. It can be very nonlinear. But when you engage in that process, I mean, what better question can you wrestle with than what should I make my life mean? And what should I put my efforts toward? And it's a scary question and it's a hairy question. And boy, it is like a bear that when you start wrestling with it, you're not gonna come out unscathed. Like you're
Yeah.
gonna take some hits, you're gonna take some scratches and you're gonna
Yeah, I've
bleed a
had
little
more
bit.
than a few existential meltdowns in this in
Yeah,
this
there's gonna
process.
be tears. There's gonna be
But
tears.
it's worth it. It's so I cannot stress enough, it is so worth it. Where I am right now is so different from where I was a couple of years ago, and I'm just so grateful for you all for creating the space for me to go through that transformation. I
Well,
hope
that
that
feels
for
like a
others.
really oh, good, good. We're gonna do that. That's what we're gonna aim to do in this training. So why don't we wrap it up there? And I'll just invite everybody who's in Lifehack Tribe to come and check out this training. I think it's gonna be amazing. I think you're gonna love it. It will be recorded, so if you can't make it live, don't worry. We'll have the replay posted. And Jenny, I'll just give you the final word, and then we'll wrap it up here. What do you think people should be thinking about, or what do you want to let people know before we wrap it up here?
Whatever you do, don't forget to have fun. The end.
Mm. I love it. I love it. Well, Jenny, thank you so much. And gang, thank you everyone for listening to this episode of the Freedom Decoded podcast. Appreciate you. And for all of you who are in Lifehack Tribe, I'll be seeing you in the training.